It's June 17, 2014, and millions of gamers around the world are at their computers playing Minecraft, the most popular indie game ever made. And amongst those players are thousands of angry people who have a bone to pick with one man, Markus Persson, aka Notch. These people are angry because a few days earlier, Notch made a change to Minecraft's license agreement that they felt would ruin the game. A rule that would prevent players from selling their in-game assets to other people, with the intention of preventing players from gaining an in-game advantage. Except that there was only one problem. That change never existed. The new rule that everyone was so upset about had in reality always been there, but because players believed otherwise, people were pissed. And as the face of the game and the CEO of Mojang, Notch became the target of their outrage. But today, everything would change. Because today, Notch would make a tweet saying that he wants nothing to do with the backlash, and that he has decided to sell his shares in the company. A tweet that was seen by Microsoft. People didn't know it yet, but a deal was being made that would change the game forever. Microsoft would become the new owners of Minecraft, and Notch would become a billionaire. So, who is Notch? Well, that depends on what you mean. There's Notch the individual, and then there's Notch the public figure. Notch the individual is just a regular guy. He's passionate about video games, he's been programming them since he was 7 years old, and he went on to create Minecraft by himself in the late 2000s. From his early interviews, he seems like a pretty normal guy. Probably not too different from your typical gamer, though he is a member of Mensa, so he's probably smarter. He's not especially charismatic.
Good talk.
Good talk, good talk.
He's nerdy, he's Swedish, he's kind of a shut-in, and he's almost always interacting with his fans. Notch the public figure, on the other hand, is a very different story. He has an overwhelmingly negative reputation that stems from his controversial tweets and divisive stances. He's frequently accused of being bigoted, aggressive, racist, or homophobic. In fact, Notch has become so widely disliked for the beliefs he holds that Microsoft has done everything they can to erase him from Minecraft. They've removed all references to him that were once in the game, and they even barred him from attending the game's 10-year anniversary celebration. In the eyes of Microsoft and much of the public, you could say that Notch is seen as, well, an asshole. But which one of these is the real Notch? Well, the answer is both, but it's also neither. Notch the individual and Notch the public figure are both equally misunderstood by people, and nobody knows this better than Notch himself, which is exemplified by the day he made that tweet, June 17th, 2014. See, the controversy he was dealing with at that time was a big factor in why he sold his shares, but there was also something else that pushed him to make that decision. Exactly one day earlier, on June 16th, 2014, a YouTube channel named Innuendo Studios uploaded a video titled This Is Phil Fish. That video described how the lead designer of the game Fez became a symbol for undeserved fame, and how he eventually grew to be so hated by the public that he completely withdrew from the gaming industry and social media entirely. Well, it just so happened that Notch saw that video. He saw how the backlash that he was dealing with at the time mirrored what had happened to Phil Fish, and it scared him. He didn't want his relationship with the public to degrade in that same way. In an interview with Forbes, he said, "I saw the documentary called This Is Phil Fish, and people were starting to talk about the concept of Notch. That disconnect became so clear to me. I don't have the relationship that I thought I did with my fans. Maybe I did early on when I had a couple thousand fans, but it's not like that anymore. It's the idea of Notch and the Minecraft community." Notch left Minecraft in hopes of escaping that relationship with the public, but that was never really an option for him. Unlike Phil Fish, Notch wasn't in controversy because of his personality. It was because of his role in Minecraft. So it makes sense that he believed detaching himself from the game was the solution. But even after he stepped away from it, global audiences continued to pay attention to him. Only now, all they had left to focus on was his personality. And the primary way they did that was through the lens of social media. Now, to put it bluntly, Notch is the kind of guy who says what he wants. He doesn't censor himself, and he has every intention to keep his presence on social media authentic. But there's a funny thing about the way platforms like Twitter work. To his direct audience, Notch is trying to provide a sincere look at his thoughts, but to the greater audience around that, he is being filtered by the very medium he is communicating through. Platforms like Twitter are designed to hyper-focus on the extremes. Whatever grabs the most attention and gets the most engagement is what leaves the biggest impression. Because of social media, our image of Notch is painted by the extremes. He doesn't have a squeaky clean, brand-safe personality like many celebrities and influencers do today. Those types of people easily pass through the filter of social media because they only show the public their good side. Notch, on the other hand, intentionally chose not to do this, even though it would compromise his public image. I want to give you a lighter example of how this has worked against Notch in the past. In 2015, Notch made a series of tweets about feeling isolated, sad, and lonely. Having just recently become a billionaire, these tweets immediately stood out. Several news organizations published articles that described Notch as a depressed and lonely billionaire, an archetype that we've seen portrayed in film and television many times before. These articles were based solely on things Notch said on Twitter, but they weren't exactly true. In response to the headlines, Notch tweeted, "There are articles about my depression because I had a bad day invented on a trend I saw. I'm sitting here having a nice day." Even though Notch wasn't really depressed, he was still perceived that way by the public. It doesn't matter that he might have friends we don't know about or that he might get fulfillment from being a father. An idea of who Notch is had already taken hold. And if he were to once again vent about feeling sad on Twitter, the public would see it as confirmation that their preconceived notions of Notch were true. This is the template for the relationship between all public figures and social media. Once a compelling enough idea attaches itself to someone's image, it doesn't easily go away no matter how many times they say otherwise. It's why there are still so many people today that insist PewDiePie is a Nazi, even though it's pretty obvious that he isn't. It's the same reason that public figures will take extra steps to avoid risking false allegations. Because even if they were vindicated, that little asterisk next to their name has a funny way of seeming permanent. That was the price of Notch being authentic on Twitter. He was labeled and categorized by the audience around him. But depression and loneliness were just the beginning. As his tweets became more controversial, Notch's public image would suffer the consequences. In June of 2017, Notch made a tweet that condemned people for being against the concept of heterosexual Pride Day, a sort of counter-movement to gay pride that is seen as homophobic. In 2019, in response to a comment that Notch made against communists, he received a reply from a transgender woman that called him a fascist and told him to suck her feminine dick. His response, that he would rather be a fascist than have a feminine dick, made headlines as evidence of his transphobia. Then there was the comment he made insisting that there are differences between transgender women and cis women, and of course he was against any hate speech laws that would enforce proper pronoun rules. These tweets were actually the primary reason that Microsoft scrubbed him from Minecraft. However, what you'll be less likely to hear about is the evidence that suggests that Notch is neither transphobic or homophobic. Things that Notch has done that make him seem pro-LGBT or even forward-thinking in regards to gender. Firstly, after receiving backlash for the heterosexual Pride Day tweet, Notch completely changed his stance. He tweeted, "I get it now. It's about pride of daring to express, not pride of being who you are." He also made several tweets at various points in time where he outright spoke against homophobic rhetoric. But my personal favorite example comes from an old blog post of his where he talks about developing Minecraft. He explains how all of the characters in Minecraft are intentionally outside of the gender binary, how he gave them all traditionally male and female traits, and how he pushed for use of the singular they as a pronoun to be used when referring to them. At the end of the post he says, "Also, as a fun side fact, it means that every character and animal in Minecraft is homosexual because there's only one gender to choose from. Take that, homophobes." If this was the only side of him that people saw, then nobody would think that Notch is homophobic. But nobody sees these parts of him because they get filtered out. They don't trend on Twitter and they're not newsworthy. And so Notch went from being lonely to being homophobic as well. On November 30th, 2017, Notch made a tweet saying, "It's okay to be white," a phrase that some consider to be an alt-right dog whistle. When asked to say Nazis are bad with nothing else appended to the statement, he responded with, "Nazis and communists are bad." And most egregiously, in a now deleted tweet, Notch said that if we were allowed to discuss IQ differences between populations, there would be fewer conspiracy theories. which he followed up with, high IQ individuals are overrepresented in positions of power for benign reasons, but not being allowed to discuss that makes people come up with explanations like nepotism. It's a pretty spicy take, so make of that what you will, but while you do, also keep in mind these other examples from Notch. He has tweets criticizing racism and continues to insist that he is not a racist. He has celebrated action taken against far-right racist propaganda that was targeting immigrants in Sweden. And once again, in regards to Minecraft, he clarified that he intentionally designed the main character to be of ambiguous race. These examples all suggest that Notch might not actually be racist, but that didn't stop him from being labeled as one. And that label reveals a greater problem with our culture, which is that history and public perception is not always defined by what is true, but rather what is remembered. It happens in our news, it happens on our social media, and it even happens in our encyclopedias. To this very day, the Wikipedia article for Minecraft states that Notch departed from Mojang because of the controversy that was started all those years ago, which is true. However, the misconception that it all arose from a change made by Notch to the license agreement is written there too, which is false. So, given all of this information and counter evidence, you might be wondering how I see Notch. Do I think Notch is racist? Do I think Notch is homophobic? Well, the answer is, I don't know. The only conclusion I can really draw from this is that I don't know Notch well enough to have a stance on any of it. Some will say that it's safer to assume that he is problematic if there's any ambiguity at all, but I say that's wrong. When there's compelling evidence on both sides of the fence, it's not fair to make judgments that ignores what's in plain sight. In fact, I would say that more often than not, we are unequipped to make conclusions about public figures in general. I don't know that Notch is a bad person any more than I know that a squeaky clean celebrity is a good person. All I can say is that one cares more about being brand friendly and will therefore go to greater lengths to avoid controversy, which is the problem with the social climate that we now live in. In the court of public opinion, our jury has been replaced by a mob mentality that lacks any understanding of complexity or nuance. Platforms like Twitter and Instagram give us bite-sized peeks into public figures that we never used to have. It creates this illusion of intimacy because now they can interact with us in ways they never could before. It makes it easier for us to think that we know who these public figures are, and it makes us feel justified in our judgments. But casting judgment is easy. Understanding someone is difficult. What public figures share with us is, and always will be, limited. Most are presenting a fake version of themselves that is tailored for social media to avoid the risk of being misrepresented by the public. And even those who are being authentic like Notch can still only give us a glimpse into their lives. Would you still think Notch is a lonely person if he didn't feel the need to clarify otherwise? Did he only say that to get people off his back when in fact he really is lonely but just doesn't want the public to know? Nobody has the answer to those questions except for Notch himself and maybe his closest friends. That's why a tweet or a video is never a good source of information about a person, because there's always more out there beyond the surface. There will always be that layer of separation from the public and public figures, a difference between who a person is in real life and who they are on social media. The truth is, people are complicated. You don't know that celebrity that you've been following for years, you don't know that streamer or YouTuber that you watch for hours a day, and you don't know Notch.